So good afternoon, folks. Thanks for being here. I'm Joe Kerby, County Administrator, and I've been trying to go around twice a year and give employees that are interested updates about what's going on with the county relative to priorities and things that we're working on, share some good news, share some challenging news, those type of things. But before I get started, one of the reasons that I'm late, okay, is I'm a big advocate of employee safety, right? And so to that end, we have purchased a whole slew of these personal auditory detective devices or something like, they're called pads. Do any of you have one of these currently? Okay, so we've got one. So what these are, this is you just separate the chain from this piece and it sounds out an alarm, okay? I'll do it briefly so you can hear what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like, okay, and you just reinsert it. So the reason I want to point this out is as we're beginning to focus more and more on security of our facilities and for employee safety, we are providing these free of charge to an employee that wants one. So all you have to do is contact Mary Otley, Debbie Parsons, anybody in finance, which also oversees risk management, and you can have one of these for free. You can pass them out to everybody in your department, what have you. So please think about getting one of these. Now I can tell you there are a couple of downsides about these, and I'll give you an example. I am a huge shopper at Kohl's, okay, and they have sales on ties from time to time, right? So this weekend I had my 30% coupon, okay, and I love 30% coupons and going to Kohl's, okay? So unfortunately I had this in my pocket, and on two separate occasions in Kohl's this went off, okay? The first time I was able to recover fairly quickly and get it reinserted. The second time I was not able to get it secured back in place, and so it went off and it went off and it went off. So after three members of the Kohl's staff came up and approached me, so it got their attention, right, which is what it's intended to do, I decided to take it out and put it in my car for the rest of my shopping adventure at Kohl's. So, but anyway, they're there for you. We made your department heads aware of it, so please reach out and get one if you'd like. And we'll probably have a few questions, I would imagine, regarding safety and security today, so I will keep it handy. I also use that when Lily is mad at me trying to escape. But one of the reasons I was late is because I just set that off in the board's office inadvertently because I knocked my pocket on a end of a table and it disengaged, so be careful. I know. Well, it really works, okay, even when you don't want it to, okay, even when you don't want it to. So let's get started. Thanks for being here again today. And we're going to jump into this if I can figure out how to work this. Which way am I pointing, Lily? Right there? Yeah?
Oh, you know what? I didn't turn it on.
Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Now we can get started. So folks, if you can't hear me, let me know. I have a really soft voice. It's hard for me to project, but if you make me aware of it, I will try and project more so. So this is the agenda today. I'm not going to read the slides to you. I will reference them, but these are the topics that we're going to talk a little bit about today. 6 months ago when we gave this presentation, we showed this list of priorities and kind of this circle of life or what have you. And these are 5 priorities that I am currently focused on. Several of these priorities we addressed at the last meeting, so we'll either touch on very lightly today or not at all. But the things we will talk about today are organizational development and innovation and employee engagement in particular. So let's get started. So one of the things that I think a multitude of studies show is that if you can have an engaged workforce, you will have a higher performing organization. Okay, and for us, what a higher performing organization looks like is that we get to offer even better services to the public that we're intended to serve. So I really like organizational development. I like employee engagement, and it's something that I think we have to get better at within Benton County. And one of the reasons I do this and one of the reasons I engage employees in other formats, and we're asking department heads and managers and supervisors to do this as well. So to that end, one of the ways that we're going to be engaging employees is we were going to, and this will happen between now and January, but we will be sending out an employee engagement survey. And this is really to figure out how are we doing? You know, what do employees think about working for Benton County? What do you like? What don't you like? And so I just wanted to highlight that this will be coming your way within the next couple of months. HR is leading this project. There will be a third party that will be administering the survey, so we can ensure that your survey responses are confidential. And I think that this is a really important survey, at least for me, because I need to get a better idea of what all of you are thinking and feeling. And then from that, we'll be developing some work plans to address whatever issues there are within the organization. I can tell you this is more important than ever. We're competing with so many other folks for employees. I read an article the other day that the unemployment rate, the last time it was as low as it is right now, was 1969. Okay, 1969. We have the lowest employment rate since 1969. So we are competing for employees just like many other employers are. So we want to make sure that this is a great place to work, not only for you, but for folks that are thinking about coming to work for us. We want them to know what we have to offer. So in order to figure out where we need to improve, we need a baseline. So we're going to establish a baseline with this particular survey. So stay tuned. That's one way in which we're beginning to look at how we can engage employees and identify goals for improving our organization and the service to the public. Also, one of the other areas, and hopefully you've seen this, do we have any new employees in the group here that have been hired just in the last 3 or 4 months? Okay. So have you been through your employee onboarding? Okay. So one of the things that we have asked HR to do is really step up the onboarding process. That means anywhere from where do I find my desk, to how do I sign up for classes, to what's the culture like, what are our organizational priorities. We really want to be welcoming to new employees that come into the organization, and we want to help them get connected and figure out how they can plug into the organization, not only to their department, but organizationally wide. So to that end, we are now conducting monthly and quarterly onboarding sessions with new employees. HR has done an outstanding job of getting those up and running and rolling those out, and those are really just brand new. So we need feedback. For those of you who have been through it, make sure you're sharing with HR your feedback. But another way in which we're trying to engage employees and ensure that employees have an idea about the organization, where we're headed and why we're headed there. Also, another thing that we've tried to resurrect, and this dates back years, but we've dusted it off and refreshed it, and that is our Management Essentials training. Once again, it's my responsibility to ensure that managers and supervisors and directors in the organization have the appropriate tools to manage effectively. And we kicked this off back in August. It's a series of 5 courses that stretch over a 5-week period. And this is a training that's specifically focused on managers, directors, supervisors, and for those employees that consider themselves an emerging leader, or if you want to be in a management role in the future, this is a good place to start, a good place to get connected, and a good place to begin to really get the management essentials that we feel folks in management need. So this particular session is now over. We will have 2 more of those sessions within 2019, and I don't have those dates yet, but stay tuned to the B and or emails that come out from myself and or Lilia or HR. Also, let's talk about emergency notifications. Who was under their desk last Thursday at 10:18 a.m.? Okay, I think I saw pictures of a few of you. Okay, who had the bubble wrap around them? That was a hilarious picture. Who was that? That was at Avery? Yeah, so if you'll remember, we participated in the Oregon Shakeout, the drill for earthquakes, and what we try to do is attach to that our emergency notifications. So one of the ways in which we're trying to get better is how we communicate with employees during inclement weather, during an emergency, during a building security issue. Okay, for those of you who may remember, back in February, we had a security breach at our health services building, and an angry client was able to gain entry to areas that the public is not allowed to go to. And she did threaten an employee, and she had to be removed by the local police department. That's in a nutshell. But what happened is, she got access to an area that I walked by probably 100 times over the last year, and that many other employees walked by more times than I did, and none of us saw this as a possible security issue until it happened. So it happened, so now we've realized that we do have exposures. To that end, we are trying to make sure that we improve our readiness for how to respond in emergency situations and how we can communicate during those situations. So we had difficulties with not only notifying employees in the building, but we had difficulty notifying employees that were working out in the field, coming back to the building and not being aware that there was a police issue at hand. They needed to stay away from the building. So this brought my attention to that. So we've been working with our emergency management department, and we have began to reach out to employees via a system called Everbridge. Now keep in mind, this is different than the Lynn Benton Alert. If you're signed up for the Lynn Benton Alert, that is the emergency notification that goes out to the community as a whole. But we're trying to replicate that, but just for our employees. So we use a system called Everbridge, which allows us to do that. We can send out text messages, we can send out pre-recorded messages, and we can send out emails, any or all three of those. Or individually, I should say. So what we've been trying to do is to do this monthly, because we're trying to get better. Continuous improvement. I keep looking at Derek. He always reminds me of that. But you can see back in August when we launched our first one, this was an email that, or I'm sorry, a text message that went out. And when we send those text messages out, we ask you folks to do YES and reply. When you do that, the computer then recognizes that we've been able to reach you, and then we can report out on that. So we had 57% of our employees that took the time to respond yes. It literally takes less than 15 seconds. I actually did it in less than 10. I've been practicing. So we had 57 that said yes, replied. So it's like, great, we're now able to communicate with 57% of our workforce via text message. We had 43% that chose not to confirm it. Now, keep in mind, you're not required to do this, but we're requesting that you do this. We ran another test in September, and you can see where we did a great job of 75% of our employees confirmed that they had received it. We had 25% that were not confirmed. And then we just ran it again as part of the Oregon earthquake shakeout. And we thought we were going to do even better, but Leah just updated these figures, and you can tell we didn't do better than we did in September. The goal is to get that to 90%. We want to be able to know that with confidence, that we can communicate with 90% of our workforce. Why is that not 100%? Well, because people changed their cell phones. Some people entered their cell phone incorrectly. There's all kinds of reasons that we can't get it to 100%. But I think our reasonable target should be 90%. So we ask that you take this seriously. There'll be another test coming up in November. And just take the time to respond with yes, so that we can confirm that we're able to communicate. This will come in handy when there's inclement weather, when there's emergency situations at buildings, when there are other things that we need to inform employees of in an immediate manner. Now keep in mind, text messages is only one way. We'll also use emails. We'll also use pre-recorded messages. You could get all three potentially. Lilia, anything that you wanted to share, because you just updated this slide, you may have additional insight.
I think the only thing that I'll share is that each time that we're testing the system. What we're really trying to do is focus on text messages. But each time we're testing the system, we're having a different person send it. So we're trying to build capacity of the people who are able to actually send the messages. So there are little nuances each time the message is sent because we are practicing. So the August and the October test accidentally were looping mechanisms. So if you, in case you got the email, it was because you didn't respond by a text yes. So, or perhaps you did respond by a text yes, and the person working next to you got the email. They got the email because they didn't respond to the text within a certain time frame, so it triggered. I'm sorry, they got the email because, yeah, they didn't respond to the text within a certain time frame, so that's why it triggered the email instead.
What is the time frame? If you're in a meeting or something on the phone?
Sure.
So I think it's 10 minutes. I mean, it's pretty quickly because it's meant to be rapid response. So the full system is, if we send a text and you don't respond, you're gonna get, and that's your primary in employee self-service, it's gonna then roll to your non-primary cell for your text message again. Then it's gonna roll to your email, then it's gonna roll to your desk line. And it's gonna go through that until you respond that you have received the message.
Actually, last Thursday, I'm one of those that made a mistake. Okay, I did not actually have my work cell phone entered into the employee self-service, so I got it on my regular personal cell phone, but I didn't have my work cell phone entered. So please make sure that if you have a personal phone and a work phone, I encourage you to list both of those. And to your point, you know, we're not always sitting there unless you're one of my 5 kids. Drives me crazy. I can't even have a conversation with them anymore, right? They're too busy texting. But you know, for those of you who are in meetings or don't have your phone accessible at all times, obviously we understand that that's going to be a situation. We don't expect you to sit there and check your cell phone every 3 minutes within a meeting. But I do encourage you more and more when you get out of meetings, check it. And please take time to respond, because really we're just trying to build organizational capacity to respond in an emergency situation and or to inform you of unfolding events and make you aware of what's actually transpiring. So we're putting a lot of effort into this. I want to thank our folks in emergency management for helping get this up and running. But we're going to continue to practice every month. Okay, so once a month you're going to get something from us. In November, if it really looks screwed up, it's because I'm the one that gets to send the November message. Okay, so I am being trained, as Lilia indicated. Any other questions, folks, before we move on? Okay. So we're going to talk about a very sobering subject here, and this is a subject that I am not an expert at. Okay, but I am smart enough to know that when I look at the figures, that we can't talk about PERS without knowing that this is going to impact our organization as it relates to funding and decision making. And so those of you who have been around for any length of time in Oregon are aware that our retirement system, PERS, has been having difficulties, and this goes back many years. Many pension systems across the country have had similar difficulties. I was part of a pension program in Colorado, and these discussions are the same discussions that state has been having for a multitude of decades as well. So pension systems are having difficulties across the country. Oregon's is no exception. And so what we wanted to show you here, and Lilia's going to say, Joe, you're not using your notes, so I'm going to forget some very important statistics. So here we go, Lilia, I'm ready. So we have a new slide up here. Looks different than my old slide, and so hopefully this one is a little bit clearer in terms of what we're trying to communicate. But when you look at this slide, and you should have this on your chair so you can see it more easily than up here on the board. But what you're looking at here are a series of budgets, the 2015 to 2017 budget. We do a 2-year budget, okay? So you can just see as we go all the way out to 2037. So the blue bar is the employer amount that the employer contributes to PERS. And then you'll see the brown or the orange color, that's called the pickup. In the case of Benton County, if you're a Benton County employee, the county picks up the employee's share that otherwise the employee would be paying. That's currently known as, I think, the 6% IAP component. So the county also pays that on behalf of employees. And then you'll see the other line that is the debt. And so you can see the dollar amounts there, and I'm just going to focus on do we have cumulative or not, Lilia?
Not on this
Okay, not on this side. So let me talk a little bit about the debt piece, because a lot of employees don't realize this. If you look at your paycheck stub, you're going to see two lines on there. There's one line that says like PERS 2004 debt. There's another line that says PERS 2002 debt. Back in that time frame, the county issued bonds. We borrowed money so that we could pay for some of our future liabilities as it relates to PERS. And so that was a proactive effort that the county undertook to help us begin to advance, if you will, or to really begin trying to pay for future liabilities that we have. And so we did issue debt. So you'll see that on your paycheck. Every paycheck, and this doesn't come out of your paycheck, let me make that clear. It's just represented on your paycheck as to how much we're paying back for debt for each particular employee. So a lot of employees don't realize that the county is still paying on debt that we issued way back when. You're going to see this gray bar on, I think that's gray. Is that gray, Lilia? Once you get out here to 2027 to 2029, it disappears. That's because the debt is paid off at that point in time. So then we just have the blue bar and the orange bar. But here's the thing to look at, and this is how I just have to share with you that there's no way that we can meet this without making changes. Okay, and these are obligations that we have no choice to meet, right, as the county. So if you look here, the 2015 to 2017, that probably comes out to be, what, $11, $12 million here a year is what we're investing on behalf of employees. Just go out to 2021 to 2023. You're going to see that that amount is, what, in excess of 20 million? Is that right? Just looking at that. So we're going to go from 11 to 12 million to 20 million during the course of that time. And so that's a pretty significant impact. We've had, if you look at it just within a 6-year period, we're actually tripling, I believe, the amount from 2015 to 2017. We did the first lift of the 3 lifts that we have to make here. Then we're making the second lift here, the third lift. Just when you look in the next 6 years, that's a pretty substantial bite. And so we're just making everybody aware of this. The discussion we're having with you today is no different than most local governments are having with employees. So we're just highlighting that, hey, folks, there's some troubled waters ahead, and there's no way we can just manage that without having impacts to our budgets, to what we can afford to do and how we can afford to do it. So you're going to see how we're beginning to make decisions based on this information. Now, I do want to point out that this information here, this is not information that the county just fabricated behind closed doors with a bunch of smoke and mirrors. This is information that's coming directly from PERS. So PERS gives us numbers on an annual basis about what we need to begin planning for. So these numbers are coming from PERS, and they're not numbers that we're just fabricating to scare everybody. But I'm just providing you a commercial that those articles that you see in the newspaper from time to time, there's some truth to those articles, and in this case, you'll be seeing it will impact us significantly. We're actually challenged all the way out till 2037, and you'll start to see things settle down at that point. And I was asked, why is that the case? And frankly, it's because Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees begin to reach the end of their life. And so this is all based on demographic information. And so we begin to, and that's unfortunate that that's how we see savings at that point, because none of us want to be there, right? But look at that, folks. Look at that curve. That's pretty substantial. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is, on the heels of this, our finance department is going to be setting up presentation similar to this where they're going to go throughout the organization, and they'll actually be talking more specifically about PERS. We have a lot more information that goes behind these slides, and we want to make sure that you are aware of more details regarding PERS. Now, keep in mind, we are not there to consult with you regarding your retirement. Those are PERS representatives, but we want to make sure you understand what is occurring and what the future looks like with PERS. So let's move on. Let's talk about performance management system. And hopefully you're going to start to see a connection here as we move forward. But the performance management system is another one of those areas on that circle of life that I showed you earlier, one of those 5 areas. And I can tell you, as I go around to do my Joe with Joes twice a month, this is something that I get a lot of feedback from employees regarding our performance management system. Now I'm going to bifurcate the discussion a little bit. So I'm talking about performance management system, which is different than pay for performance. Okay, so we'll talk about pay for performance here shortly, but we're going to talk about briefly performance management. So when I talk about performance management, I look at the system that we use to provide feedback to employees regarding performance. Okay, some of you know this as NeoGov, and so suffice it to say that I received a lot of feedback when I originally got here about a year ago about issues with our performance management system. So after hearing that theme, constant theme from employees, I went back to our performance management team who had originally worked on this and had launched our system about 3 years ago. So we re-energized that team, brought them back to the table, and I said, folks, these are some of the concerns that I'm hearing. What are you hearing? And oh, by the way, I think we have data from previous surveys that we should look at as well. So to that end, we did an analysis, looked at the feedback we were receiving, and decided to put a work plan together for 2018 to begin to address some of these concerns. Now you'll see, and I won't go through these in detail, but I can tell you that these bulleted areas are the areas in which that performance management team decided to go about tackling were these issues that are bullet pointed in front of you. So what we did is we developed subcommittees. We had performance management team members leading those subcommittees. We reached out through emails to employees to solicit involvement of employees as part of those work groups. And to date, we've completed 4 of those processes and looking at improvements. We have 3 more that are in progress right now. If any of you have a desire to be on the subcommittee, one that we're just getting up and running is the Competencies and Rating Subcommittee. Adam Lortz from IT is leading that. And so there is a current opportunity. I think they've met once now, but there's a current opportunity to get plugged in if you want to have input into changes in this respective area of our performance management system. So the point is, as we heard there were concerns, we re-energized the performance management team, we developed a work plan, and now we're walking through this work plan. One of the questions I was asked in our last meeting that we had, the last presentation is, hey Joe, what about 360 evaluations? How come those aren't up there? I can tell you that 360 evaluations, and if you're not familiar with those, it's not only having the lens from your manager or supervisor or director about what your performance looks like. It's also getting input from those that you work with, that maybe are peers or maybe folks that report to you, or in some cases maybe even folks outside the organization. And so 360 evaluations are in our parking lot for right now. They are on the 2019 work plan, tentatively. We talked about them months ago. But if you're wondering about 360 evaluations, yes, we will be taking a look at those, what that's going to look like and how that will be rolled out. I don't know any of those details other than there is a commitment to look at 360 evaluations and how we can benefit as an organization by using those. I can also tell you that the commissioners are using a 360 evaluation for me. And currently, not only are they soliciting input from inside the organization, but also outside the organization. So I don't want you to, if you're concerned about that particular concept, I would encourage you not to be. I've been part of 360 evaluations in many other places I've worked, and I truly find them beneficial to get feedback from others other than just my direct supervisors. So stay tuned for that. But so once again, heard concerns, put the performance management team back together, developed a work plan, and now we're implementing that work plan. There's another work plan that will be coming out for 2019 that we haven't established yet. It will have 360 evaluations as part of it. So you're going to see a number of changes to the NeoGov and performance management system coming up the first of the year that are resulting from these completed work groups. HR will be communicating those out to you in advance, but I think that there's a lot of positive changes that are being made that will address some of the frustrations that exist regarding the use of the system. So Lilia, any notes that I missed?
I would just say on the handout that you have, the side with all the bullet points are the specific improvements that each work team put together for the committees. And Joe has a list of all of the departments
Oh, thank you.
involved with the
I do have a list, and I can even read it without my glasses, I think. So thanks for mentioning that, Lilia. One of the things I wanted to highlight is, folks, we are trying to provide opportunities for employees to get engaged, to provide input, and to influence important things within the organization. So to that end, we had volunteers from these departments: juvenile, finance, assessment, records and elections, HR, health, community health centers, natural areas and parks, fairgrounds, the Board of Commissioners office, information technology, public works, and community development. So we had employees volunteer from those departments to get engaged in this process. So we appreciate folks getting involved. I encourage you to take opportunities because once again, it's not just about Joe steering the ship, it's about folks having input in terms of how we steer the ship and how we use tools. I don't have all the answers. Okay, I know that you expect me to, but frankly, I don't, and my wife will be the first one to tell you that I don't have all the answers. So anyway, get engaged. Provide us your feedback and input. Okay, so now I mentioned bifurcation. So that was the performance management piece. Now we're going to talk about changes to pay for performance. So I showed you the slide up there relative to PERS for a reason. Number one, to highlight it as a concern. But number two, and just as importantly, to share with you that there are going to be impacts because of those changing financial conditions for the county and the increased obligations we're having. So what we're trying to do is be really upfront about this. And this gets a little confusing, folks. So let me give you a brief lesson. So within our organization, we actually have about 4 types of employees. You either belong to the AFSCME union, you belong to the ONA union, or you belong to the BC DSA union. Okay? So you either belong to one of those 3 unions or a 4th category, which we call non-represented employees, which are employees that are not represented by a union, such as your management confidential staff, if you will. So when we talk about these slides up here, these slides only address if you're currently non-represented or part of the ONA union. Okay, so if you're part of AFSCME or part of BC DSA, this information does not apply to you, but we want you to be aware of it. Okay, so you probably remember that there was a email sent out, 2-3 weeks ago, Lilia, is my guess. And that email tried to explain some changes. And I'm not going to split hairs. These changes are actually represented on a sheet that I believe you have in front of you. And but I want to talk to you about some of the implications. So we had the discussion about PERS, right? And we just got those new PERS numbers. We updated the graphs. And we looked at those graphs as part of our performance management team and said, holy smokes. Okay, 3 years ago when we rolled out the pay for performance piece, okay, the performance management team took forward a proposal to the Board of County Commissioners. And that proposal was for a 3-year rollout of the pay for performance. And each year it had different, if you will, compensation tied to different levels of performance. So in the 3rd year of the implementation for pay for performance, the proposal at that time that the board actually embraced and approved was in the 3rd year, if you met certain criteria on your performance evaluation, okay, you could achieve a 5% salary increase, okay, in addition to a 5% bonus, okay? I don't know where all of you folks have worked prior to this, but I can tell you in most organizations that I've worked for, that is a really generous component to the pay for performance system. And that should get your attention because I think it is very generous to not only get a 5% salary increase, have that ability, and a 5% bonus, okay? So that was the intent, okay, 3 years ago. Board adopted that year 1, year 2, year 3. We're in that year 3 now. Okay, well, as we were beginning to look at the costs of that particular program and the 5% salary increase and the 5% bonus, it became apparent to us based on the changing conditions regarding our finances and the heavy lifts that we were going to have to do with PERS that we could not afford to implement the 3rd year as we had intended. Okay, so we have had to back off of the 5% salary increase plus the 5% bonus. Okay, that is an unsustainable course at this point. And so as the performance management team is expected to do to manage this program, we looked at our future financial forecasts, and unfortunately it's not in the cards for us to be able to honor that 3rd year commitment. So I'm not the one that likes to get up here and tell you bad news if you are impacted by this, but I do want to be upfront with employees that, hey, we've had to make some changes to adjust to our changing financial position, and a large portion of that directly related to PERS. So you will see changes highlighted on your document, and we've tried to create a, what would you call it, Malia? A table, thank you, yes. Gosh, you think I'd remember that? Yeah. How smart is our county administrator? He can't even tell you if it's a table or a matrix or a chart or. Thank you. So there is a table there, and if you are part of O&A and or non-represented, you would want to take a look at that. So, however, we did not want to just throw out the pay for performance piece. So we did back off of the compensation increase that an employee could achieve, and that's represented on that particular chart. So there is still money to be had, if you will, relative to increases. It's just not at the generous level that we had originally intended it. So once again, a direct correlation to our changing financial conditions. Questions about this, folks? Tammy.
I just have a comment. Could you elaborate? I think it's really important to elaborate a little bit on the midpoint. That it's
Sure. So what would you like me to?
Well, the midpoint. All of these numbers here are after you've reached the midpoint, and that the midpoint is adjusted and it moves with market and those kinds of things. Because I think that's
Sure.
really important.
Okay. So let me address the midpoint. The midpoint is something that we often refer to when it comes to human resources compensation, and Tracy Martineau, our HR director, can talk to you about this for hours. And I say that from a very complimentary standpoint because I can't. She's much more versed in it than I am. But in these particular cases, the information that's being shared here is if you are currently above the midpoint of your salary range. So in our compensation plan, as with most organizations, your particular job title has a minimum salary range and a maximum salary range associated with it. Within the midst of that, we call it the midpoint, okay, is what we refer to as market. And market means, in my mind, that is when we compare our salaries to the market, that is a very competitive market salary, and it's tied to the market, okay? And so if you're above that midpoint, meaning you're being paid better than the market, okay, this applies to you, okay? Now, Tammy also touched on how things get adjusted, okay? I think I have to look to Lilia. She's our communications person, and she helps with a lot of the communication that we pump out, and I can't remember all of it. But I think we sent out a email, or HR sent out an email recently about adjusting the salary ranges 2.8%, okay? And so what we are doing and have been doing for the last 7 years is we adjust those minimum and maximum salary ranges in addition to the midpoint a certain amount every year. Now, we don't compare against what's called the CPI. Okay, what we compare against is what we call the ECI. The ECI actually is tied to the costs in the market for employees and for salary and benefits, and how are those costs moving upwards from this year to last year, or downward. In most cases, in today's market, they're moving upward. So according to the ECI within our region of the country, it's saying that employee costs in terms of salaries and benefits are increasing by about 2.8%. So we move that range 2.8%, including the midpoint. If you fall, once we move that range, that doesn't mean employees automatically get a salary increase at that point. It moves the range, and it gives you the potential to advance further into that range. However, if we move that range and your salary is below that range now, then we will adjust your salary, if you're below the minimum salary range, up to the minimum salary range. Okay, so that's how the 2.8% ECI adjusts salary ranges on an annual basis. Tracy or Tammy, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anything else that you would like to expand on? Because you and I have had lots of conversations on this topic with HR. Is there anything that I missed?
No, I just think that really needs to be understood, is that there is a midpoint and it is adjusted with market, and as you stated, you will always be moving towards that market and being equitable with the market. And when you're above market, the more you excel, and I think it's great that the county is acknowledging that the top performers still get a 5% base salary increase. There was discussion about just a lump sum, and those weren't, that doesn't add to your retirement. So I think that there was lots of discussion with management, and I think this really ended up being a good change.
Great, thank you. Other questions or things you would like me to elaborate on, or anyone else on this particular topic? So once again, you can throw tomatoes at me, but once again, we're just trying to make sure that we're being upfront with employees and saying, hey, we are making changes, and this is why we're making changes. Okay, so let's move on. So keep in mind our PERS challenges. Now we're making decisions that impact our finances, one that we made just recently in terms of tweaking the pay for performance. So you may be asking me, well, Joe, what are some ways that we can manage that financial mountain that we see coming in front of us? And because we are all going to have to work towards helping us manage that significant change. One of the things that I like to equate it to, I don't know if is the adjustable rate mortgage. If any of you have ever had an adjustable rate mortgage, which adjusts according to the interest rate, if you will. That's the way I kind of equate PERS to. We're on this adjustable rate mortgage. We don't get to determine what we pay. We're told what we pay, and that is adjust based on the ongoing financial performance of PERS. So the reason that I share that with you is that's one of those expense categories that we don't have a lot of ability to control other than the number of FTEs that we have, or full-time equivalent employees. But so it's like being tied to a adjustable rate mortgage, and I don't know if any of you could manage a tripling your mortgage right now over the course of the next 6 years. I think that would be a strain on most of us. But in effect, that's kind of what's happening with PERS and the rates that we're paying. So let's talk about a three-legged stool. It's not pictured up here, but I like to refer to it. Okay, when I refer to the three-legged stool, I'm really talking about revenues and expenses, and then business processes and or innovation. So we can seek to generate additional revenue. Sometimes additional revenue is generated for us due to development that's occurring and we receive more property taxes. Thanks to assessment, no pressure, okay? But that is one way in which we see new revenues is through growth and development and increase in property taxes. Once again, that's something we don't necessarily have direct control over, but we are the recipients of increased property taxes. In other cases, we have other taxes. One tax that we're looking at now is a transient lodgers tax. It's a tax that the county does not impose on hotels. But we are looking at doing that. We have that ability under state statute. And so the reason that I point that out is we're looking at that as we speak, and you'll be seeing lots of media about this over the course of the next 3 months. That particular tax would raise on the neighborhood of $500,000 a year. Now we're very constrained by state statute as how that money can be spent, and primarily the majority of that money would go to benefit improvements out at the fairgrounds. But the reason I pointed out is revenues is one leg of that stool. We need to continue to look and identify other ways in which to generate additional revenue for our organization so that we can sustain the services that we have to offer. Now, I do want to recognize James for a minute because this is something that when I talk to my friends and neighbors, I bore them to death about county government, but I like to talk about it, right? And so, you know, one of the examples that I give to my friends and neighbors is, do you know that the county, we can do your passport for you? Okay, James, our county clerk, right here, James, wave, Morales, within our county clerk's office, you can go get your passport. So you no longer need to go to the post office, and you can come right to James's office and get your passport. We're friendlier, we're more efficient than the post office, and it generates revenue for the county, okay? And so most people don't know that that passport service that we offer actually generates revenue. So thanks to James, you incorporated that how many years ago, James? 2008. 2008. So, but I bet most of you wouldn't think of passports being a revenue source for the county. It is. Another revenue source, we earn about $300,000 a year out at the fairgrounds because of the little RV park that we have there, and for the parking of RVs during OSU games. Okay, we have about 150 spaces out there that we rent out during OSU games for RVs. So that's another area that most people don't equate revenues with. Finally, I'll end the revenue story on landfill franchise fees. That's a very large revenue source for the county. Whenever you go out to the landfill and pay as you're entering, a share of those fees not only go to Republic that operates the landfill, but also comes back to the county. So we need to be innovative in terms of how we can generate future revenues. That's a challenge that I'm putting out there for all of you as well. The second part of it is how do we manage expenses? Okay, that's the second leg of the stool. That's going to be an ongoing challenge for us as we develop future budgets. But we've got to look at maintaining and or eliminating expenses where we can. Now, does that mean we're just going to slash and burn? No, that's not how I do business. But we've got to be very strategic and thoughtful about how we spend our money in the future, more so than ever. So then let's talk about the third leg of the stool, which is really the innovation piece. This is something that I really like to talk about and something I really believe in. This is one of the ways in which we're going to be able to manage some of our financial challenges. And we've got a number of examples for you that we'll show you. We may only get through one today because of timing. But what is innovation? It's a culture of continual process improvements. Okay, Joe doesn't have all the corner on the market regarding the best ideas. As a matter of fact, Lilia and those that work closely with me will tell you I have terrible ideas. You know, I like to think I have a good one now and then, but anyway, how do we as employees, how do all of us identify ways in which we can do business more efficiently? Sometimes that involves IT systems, okay, that make us more efficient. In other cases, it involves identifying where we don't add value or where a step in a process doesn't add value that we can eliminate. And in other cases, it's like, you know, should we be doing this at all? I just had that conversation in a meeting this morning about a process that we go through. And it's like, well, you know what? If nobody's reading it, why are we doing it? Okay? And so innovation sounds like a really fancy word, but it's really basic, and it comes from all of us. It's not just about myself or the directors. We're not the only ones that can have innovative ideas. You folks have many innovative ideas. And I would challenge you to go back to your office and spend 15 minutes thinking about the answer to this question. And that question is, what drives you crazy about your job? Okay? Each one of you can sit down and put together a list of probably 5 to 10 things very quickly that drive you crazy about your job. Part of it may be me. I'm sorry if that's the case. But to scratch that one off for the time being and focus on those improvements that you can make in your office. Because oftentimes if you ask yourself that question, there's a handful of things that drive you crazy that you could probably make changes to that would make your life better, would make us more efficient, and in turn would help save money. So when it comes to innovation, I want to highlight my friend Derek. Derek, wave your hand. Derek's from IT. Derek helps with a lot of business process improvements, especially as we're rolling out new information technology systems. And IT, just because it's a tool, doesn't mean it's the answer to everything, but in some cases it does definitely help make us more efficient. But Derek has expertise in this area and has knowledge in this area, and I've asked him to assist with leading a team to bring an innovation initiative about for our organization. So this is really a commercial, planting the seed with you and then asking you to really engage once we roll this out. Innovation, business process improvement, lean thinking, that is the third leg of the stool. And that's another way in which we're going to be able to manage our financial challenges in the future. So let's go on to this next slide, which is where you probably have more interest because you don't have to listen to me for about 3 minutes. But we're going to give you an example of what does innovation really mean. And so another commercial, as many of you know, I came from Colorado. That's my home state. And the city and county of Denver, they're a combined government. They have one government that takes care of the city and county of Denver. And they have an innovation program that has really received national accolades. It's called the Peak Academy. And I became familiar with the Peak Academy probably about 5 years ago. And we have used it in other organizations, or used a model similar to this in other organizations where I have worked. And so we're going to show you a brief video from one of the Peak Academy efforts. Is that correct, Lilia?
Yes. You ready?
I am. So this is, which one are we doing?
Recruiting.
Recruiting.
In 2015, our average time to fill, which is from the time we post the job to the time that the candidate accepts the offer, took approximately 85 days. And that is excessive time when you talk about an employment rate of 2.6% that we have in Denver.
In 2016, we accepted over 118,000 applications, and we hired just over 3,700. Comes out to about 3.5%. So I always tell people we're more competitive than Google and Harvard. So our problem isn't getting people to want to work here. Our problem is getting the right people to want to work here.
And to retain and recruit top talent in this environment, you have to be fast.
So we are losing talent, we're having to repost because we'll lose talent, then have to open the recruitment again and start the process all over again. So we are just doing a lot of overproduction, and there was just a lot of downtime, and it was just chaotic.
We needed to centralize the recruiters, we need to reduce the time of hire, we need to make it known who we are and what we do. The Peak Partnership just gave me the how-to. You know, how do we do it? And everyone on my team was involved. So they brainstormed through Peak facilitation on how do we reduce that time to hire.
So we've implemented a lot of change as part of going through the Peak Partnership. And to get change to stick, it's important that we continue to remind ourselves what our goal is. So we have daily stand-up meetings. Every day, 9 o'clock, we meet outside my office by the whiteboard and we talk about our goal, which is to reach 45 days. We developed a strategy meeting form so that all recruiters will follow the same consistent process.
And our thought was if we came up with a really formalized approach to how recruitment strategies are set at the beginning and really worked through with a hiring manager all of the logistics and the details that go along with planning the recruitment and got those things in place up front, then that would make the whole process and execution on the back end that much smoother.
I love the way they've put production boards up.
And we're so creative with our production board, like we had like a big elephant instead of the regular production board, because that was the elephant in the room. That kind of drove everybody's morale up. It made it so exciting. We felt like part of the process.
We used a lot of Peak's gap analysis tools to kind of analyze our process, things such as the spaghetti map, the 5 whys, the fishbone diagram.
This is a change that's not coming from top down. This is a change that's coming from us as a team. So just feeling empowered to be creative and innovative in coming up with solutions to solve our own problems has been a very, very great feeling.
Innovation is a mindset, and we will continue to improve our processes and keep being innovative. And I'm excited to see where we'll go next.
I want to point out that innovation is something that is currently occurring in our organization, and I'm going to have to pick on James again. Okay, James is our county clerk, and he's responsible for overseeing our elections. And over the course of the last couple of years, James identified a change where the state was requiring us to use 2 separate types of envelopes, each envelope having specific individualized wording on it. And James came up with the idea to change a handful of words and combine those 2 envelopes into one. Okay, my point in sharing that is that's not rocket science, folks. Okay, but it's taking time to look at how can we make improvements. And to James's credit, he went back to the state, proposed this idea. The state embraced it, and now it's used in all 36 counties across Oregon. Okay, so highlights to James for doing that. Okay. So once again, it's not rocket science. Also, to give you another example of where these things can be really meaningful, not just to how we manage costs, but the services that we provide to our customers. When I worked in Colorado, I worked for an organization, another county, that received about $30 million a year in property taxes every year. Okay, they were heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry, and because of a downturn in the oil and gas industry, over 4 years, that $30 million declined to $15 million. They had a 50% reduction in their property tax revenues. An organization similar in size to ours, okay, about 450 employees or so, and talk about having major impacts when you have a revenue source that gets reduced by 50%. Innovation is one of those ways in which we were able to manage that financial challenge. And in Colorado, the counties are responsible for food assistance, if you will. Some people call that food stamps. But to give you an example, we had identified a process that when a person would come in and apply for food assistance with our county, that from the date that they applied, it would actually take 2 weeks before they would actually have that food assistance. Okay, 2 weeks. 2 weeks can be a long time if you're a single parent and you have 3 kids that you're trying to support. 2 weeks without trying to find another way to get food. Well, because our team sat down and said we can do this differently, they went from 2 weeks to 2 days. Okay, what a huge difference in the lives of all the members of that community. And that was ideas that were coming from employees, folks. So it's happening in other organizations, it's happening here, and I'm just wanting to cultivate that we embrace this and we begin to do it more than ever. So remember, what are those things that drive you crazy about your job? There's a host of other videos. If you have an interest, you can go out to the Peak Academy. They have a website, and there's all kinds of links about ways in which they've made improvements. If you didn't notice here, they were going from like 84 days that it would take to complete a recruitment. Their target was to get it down to 45 days, which was almost cutting it in half. That makes a difference for those employees that are taking up the slack, why there's that vacancy sitting there, right? So there's little things that all of us can do. And by the way, we didn't show you this to pick on our HR department. There's no hidden message here other than it was a good example. Okay, so I think I hit the wrong button. Okay, there we go. So one thing that Lilia informed me is I forgot to talk about a topic, and I have like 60 seconds to do that. We'll go back to our circle at the very beginning where we had the 5 priorities, one of those being the 2040 initiative. So this is in front of you as well, and it has the, hard for me to explain, I'll just show it. So that's what it looks like right there. And on the back of that is what I really want you to pay attention to. So back in 2016, the commissioners formed a committee of about 15 citizens that represent various areas within the county, or not within the county organization, but within the larger Benton County community. And they appointed 15 to 20 individuals at that point, and they brought these folks together and they said, we want you to determine what the values of Benton County are in terms of our Benton County community, and we want you to go out and solicit feedback from the community about how they would like to see Benton County in the year 2040. That group, that council, spent about 18 months to 2 years going throughout their process of public engagement. They solicited over 10,000 comments. Those 10,000 comments were then distilled into the values that you see in front of you. And so we have been asked, when I say we, myself and all of you, have been asked, how do we figure out how to incorporate these values into our Benton County organization? So these were finalized back in February of this year. They were handed off to me. I've established a group that we call the Implementation Steering Committee, and they're responsible for figuring out how we go about implementing these core values into how Benton County does business. So let me give you a couple of examples about how this could be used. One way in which it could be used is we could use these values to drive what budget decisions we're making. Okay, that would be an area. We might be able to, may desire to use some of these values as competencies on our performance management system. That would be another way in which we could potentially use this. There's all kinds of ways, okay, but what we're being asked by the Board of County Commissioners is, okay, 450 county employees, here's the values that we want our business to run off of. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the board, over the course of the last 60 days, the Board of Commissioners, I've been working with them, and they are identifying what they wish to be our organizational goals over the course of the next couple of years. We've had a couple of meetings focused on this specifically, and to that end, the board is nearing agreement on what those highest priorities of our organization should be, and we hope to finalize those within the next 30 to 60 days. So the reason that I represent that is because we'll have organizational goals that have been provided to us by the board, and then we'll also have our core values that the board is asking us to embrace. So we have two pieces to the map, two really important pieces to the map in terms of what direction we're going to head. So stay tuned for more information about the 2040 initiative, the Implementation Steering Committee, and the Board of Commissioners' goals. And those goals will then begin to align the organization. Those will fall into my performance evaluation. They'll cascade into other department heads' performance evaluations, and over the course of the next couple of years, we will align the organization around those core values as well as according to those organizational goals. So Lilia, I'm 4 minutes over. Okay, I tried. I'm losing my breath.
You did great.
Okay, folks, thank you for taking time to listen to me. I'm open to taking questions. If you want to share those with us now, I'll be happy to answer those in front of the entire group. If you have another question you'd like to ask me on the side, I'll be happy to stay around for a few minutes as well. There's got to be a question out there. Great, thank you.
You started out talking about the unemployment rate being being so low, and how, as a county, we'll continue to look toward being competitive. How do you, or what, with the budget shortfalls and the PERS deficits, how do you see those two priorities working together, I guess?
So maybe I can back up and tell you what my compensation philosophy is, okay? So I believe that as a local government, it's my job to try and create an environment by which we attract the best and brightest throughout the city, throughout the state of Oregon, in some cases throughout the country. And one way in which you do that is by having competitive salary and benefits. So to the greatest extent possible, I want to have us continue to focus on how can we make sure that we are paying as competitively as possible. I can tell you I've been part of a number of recruitments over the course of the last year. We've lost some top recruits because they were being offered a greater salary somewhere else. That wasn't always the reason that they were not joining us, but a big reason that people haven't joined us is, and it's kind of funny, and I hate to bring it up, but sometimes it takes us a long time to get through a hiring process, okay? And I've been through 2 recruitments in the last 3 months for very important positions where we lost candidates because our process took longer than those folks that are competing against us. So it's not uncommon these days to get a phone call saying, hey, just took another offer. Hey, just took another offer. And so, I want to attract employees by competitive salary and benefits. And we also need to change some of our recruiting strategies to continue to do that. And so that's just, in a nutshell, where I would like us to be. Now, does that mean we're going to be able to pay at the 100th percentile? No, it's not. But, do we need to be really focused on what that midpoint means and what those market salary comparisons are? Absolutely. We're getting ready to begin negotiating our new contract with the BCDSA union. Their contract expires the end of next June. And so on the front end, we're doing a salary comparison as we speak to see where we currently fall with wages and are we competitive or are we not. And I can tell you that there are some positions that we're very competitive with, and I'll tell you there's some that I think we have room to grow. And an example of that is engineering positions right now. If you're in the engineering field, you have many opportunities for employment, and there's many people competing. We never used to compete with not CDOT, ODOT. ODOT, I have to get the C and the O right. So Oregon Department of Transportation, they used to not be somebody that we competed with. We usually paid more than they did. Okay, well, as a result of a recent transportation bill back in 2017, there's been a whole bunch of money funneled into the transportation arena. So they have been trying to bring on 150 additional engineers, okay, within our state to go to work for ODOT, and they've really boosted their salaries. And so they are now beginning to be one of our competitors, whereas before they weren't. But there certainly are ramifications. I'm not sure if that answered any of your question. Is there something else you'd like me to expand on?
It did answer my question. I guess the other part of that is the debt and the PERS deficit, and how do we continue to be competitive facing that debt?
So I would say stay tuned. One of the items on my performance evaluation is to create a fiscal sustainability plan for the organization, which means how can we afford to pay the bills in the future? Okay, so that is one of the items that's on my performance evaluation that I will be working on over the course of the next year, especially in light of our upcoming budget preparation. Our current budget ends the end of June of 2019, and our new budget begins July 1st of 2019. And so we're going to be heavy into working on budgets and what that means. But I think that there's a really good example that I thought about, and Okay, so I had to think which example I was going to use. So one of the ways in which we're looking at things, and this applies to benefits, okay, is that the county just went self-funded from a health insurance perspective just in the last 3 to 6 months. I think we made that decision. And that decision was made strictly to address our financial challenges. So we believe, based on the analysis that we've done over time, that we can save money by being self-funded. Over the course of 10 years, we're probably going to have 2 really bad years, and we're probably going to have 7 or 8 really good years, meaning that we're saving money. And so those are the type of things that we need to really start looking at. How can we do business differently? And just by the course of doing that one change to become self-funded, you know, we should be, and I can't give you the exact figures because I've slept since then, but we're likely to save several $1 million a year as a result of that change of becoming self-funded. And so that's an example of what do we do. Other questions? I'm sure I've hit on some sore spots, folks, so feel free, this is your chance. Yes?
In the area of employee engagement,
Mm-hmm.
done a lot of things up there as far as the management and the supervisory programs and training. Is there a thought to looking outside sort of the NeoGov type of a model to something like a Mass Ingenuity program that some Oregon businesses use and have immense success with, as far as drilling down with everybody and having leadership training all the way down to the having workshops and things with leadership?
So yes and no. First of all, I'm not aware of Mass Ingenuity, so maybe you can teach me something about that.
It kind of gets away from these written, you know, all of these written sort of. It's more about ownership, employees having ownership in their job, having. Where do you see yourself in 1 year? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Sure, absolutely.
Having really one-on-one kind of monthly discussions with supervisors and trainers to where there's a level there, but there's more sort of where are we getting to?
You bet. So I think in a nutshell, I can answer your question about do we plan to do more employee engagement and do more organizational development and provide opportunities for that over the course of time? Absolutely. I'm not aware of the particular program that you just mentioned, so I would love to have additional information. Maybe I understand it by a different name than what you're using. But you know, folks, at the end of the day, I'm not the one that delivers the service, okay? Many of you are the folks that deliver the service, and you know how to do it better than I do. And so I really am convinced that employee engagement is critical for a high-performing organization. And it's not just because I think that way. I think it's proven out through the numbers when you look at how high-performing organizations have engaged employees. And what are those ways in which we do that? It sounds like I have something to learn from you, and I'd be happy to do that. So that's still my intent. And so for me, as long as I am here, as long as the board decides to keep me, we will continue to advance employee engagement and involvement in what we do.
Okay.
So, but if you can stay after for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
That'd be great. Other questions, folks? Matt?
Just came in at the end.
Gotcha. You came in at the best time. Yeah, see? Okay, folks, I'll hang around for a few minutes. Thanks for coming, and thanks for your attention.